What's the best real-life example of the butterfly effect that I've experienced or come across? Here's one. My sister's car muffler fell off on her way to a family gathering. It wasn't a huge issue, just a minor inconvenience. But it meant she couldn't let my mom borrow the car later that week, since it would be in the shop for repairs. My mom had already planned to use the car for a doctor's appointment, so instead, my uncle offered to drive her. That small shift in our plans delayed when my uncle and aunt would leave town by a few hours. They had planned to go to their farm, but with the new arrangement, my aunt stayed at her mum's place while my uncle dropped off my mother. That very afternoon, my aunt's mom had a heart attack. Had my aunt not been there, her mother would have been completely alone. But because of that car issue, she was there. She called an ambulance, and they were able to save her. What's even more mind-blowing is thinking about the chain of events that led to that moment. My sister probably hit a bump in the road that made the muffler fall off. Maybe that bump was caused by a road worker's careless work. Perhaps he was distracted because his wife had left him. Maybe she met someone new on her commute. Perhaps she found that job through a newspaper listing, and so on. Another personal example. A few months ago, I had plans with my girlfriend for a Saturday night, but I got a last-minute call from a close friend inviting me to a party about 90 minutes north of where I live. I explained the situation to my girlfriend, and she was totally fine with it. She said, "Go have fun. I'm just filling out job applications online anyway. We can hang out tomorrow instead." I was thrilled. Things were going really well with her, and I had even bought a couple of gifts for our next date. The party turned out to be amazing. At one point during the night, I texted her to ask how she was doing. She replied that her friend was trying to convince her to go out. I encouraged her, told her it could be fun. A few hours later, I texted again. No reply. I called, no answer. The next day, I tried reaching out again. Still nothing. A few days later, I found out she had gone out that night, met someone new, and was now in a relationship with him. They're currently engaged. I encouraged my girlfriend to go out with her best friend when she wasn't feeling up to it because I was out too. That same night, she met her future fiancé. She ghosted me, didn't even send a goodbye message. They got engaged within 2 months. A lot of fast-moving relationships don't work out, and while I do suspect theirs might not last, I genuinely hope they're happy. It stings, sure. I sometimes wonder how someone else could win her over in just one night and make her forget me so quickly. I feel like I lost the love of my life because of a single spontaneous choice. But then I remember, my goal in the relationship was always to make her happy. And if she's happy now, maybe I did succeed, just not in the way I imagined. And here's another story. In 8th grade, I was doing surprisingly well in algebra. My teacher recommended me for freshman honors algebra. Even though math had never been my strong suit, I was more of an English person. Still, I got placed in that class. It turned out to be a mistake. I wasn't prepared. But that's where I met Nathan. He invited me to be part of his homecoming group since I didn't know many people. One of the girls in our group, Linda, had a younger sister named Anna. She came along just to drop Linda off, and I saw her briefly. That brief moment stuck with me. She was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. A few weeks later, I got an invite to Linda's birthday party through Nathan. Anna was there too. We became friends, and I had feelings for her for years before I finally acted on them. We're getting married this March. If my teacher hadn't misjudged my abilities and put me in that math class, I wouldn't have met Nathan, or anyone, in that group, and I'd never have crossed paths with Anna, the love of my life. And finally, one more. When I was 3, my dad gave me a cheap plastic toy airplane for Christmas. We didn't have much, but my parents always tried their best. One of the best examples of the butterfly effect I've experienced involved my sister. Her car's muffler fell off while she was driving to a family gathering. It didn't seem like a big deal at the time, but it meant she couldn't lend the car to my mom later that week. It needed repairs. My mom had already planned to use the car for a doctor's appointment. Since it was no longer available, my uncle stepped in to drive her. This simple change delayed when my uncle and aunt could leave town for their farm. While my uncle dropped my mum off, my aunt waited at her mother's house. That very afternoon, her mom suffered a heart attack. If my aunt hadn't been there, her mother would have been alone. But thanks to the timing, she was able to call an ambulance in time, and they saved her life. Thinking deeper, this moment was triggered by a road bump that may have caused the muffler to fall off. That bump could have been the result of a road worker's sloppy job. Maybe the worker had a bad day because of personal issues. Maybe his wife had just left him, possibly after meeting someone on her commute to a job she found through a newspaper listing. One small incident set off a long chain of events. Another time, a few months ago, I had plans with my girlfriend on a Saturday night. Last minute, a close friend invited me to a party about 90 minutes away. I called my girlfriend, explained the situation, and she told me to go. She said she'd just work on job applications and we'd hang out on Sunday. I was relieved and excited. Things were going really well between us. I had even bought her a few small gifts. The party was fantastic. I checked in with her during the night. She told me her friend was trying to convince her to go out. I encouraged her to do it. A couple of hours later, I texted again. No reply. I called. No answer. The next day, still no word. Eventually, I found out she had met someone that night, and they had started dating. She never messaged me again. Within 2 months, they were engaged. It hurt. I couldn't believe she moved on that fast, or that she didn't even explain. But I meant it when I said I wanted her to be happy. And she is. So, in a strange way, I guess I fulfilled my goal. Still, I sometimes wonder how someone could sweep her off her feet so quickly, and I admit I feel a bit replaced. Here's another story. In 8th grade, I was unexpectedly excelling at algebra. My teacher recommended me for the honors class in high school. I was shocked. Math had never been a strong point. I preferred English. That single decision, putting me in a class I had no business being in, changed everything. That's where I met Nathan. He invited me to a homecoming event, since I didn't know many people. One of the girls there, Linda, had a younger sister named Anna. I only caught a quick glimpse of her, but she made a lasting impression. Weeks later, I got an invite to Linda's birthday through Nathan. Anna was there again. We became friends. I'd loved her for years before finally doing something about it. We're getting married in March. If my teacher hadn't placed me in that class, I never would have met Nathan or anyone in that group, including my future wife. When I was 3, my dad gave me a cheap plastic toy airplane for Christmas. We didn't have much, but my parents always tried their best. That toy sparked a lifelong love for aviation. I became obsessed. That passion led me to join the military as a helicopter mechanic, where I served for 10 years. Last year, I bought a ticket, one I could barely afford, to an air show. There I met a representative from a helicopter flight school. He told me I could use my GI Bill benefits to cover the cost. Today, I'm a private helicopter pilot, working on more certifications. All of it traces back to that little toy plane. It gave me something priceless, imagination and passion. I've thanked my dad, but honestly, it'll never feel like enough. He, along with my kids, has been my biggest support through this journey. I couldn't have done it without them. Another time, I skipped school. Just one day. My mum allowed it since I was doing well. She decided to take the day off too, and we were going to go fishing. It didn't rain, so we stayed home. That day, my aunt, who we hadn't seen in years, stopped by. We spontaneously visited her place, and she ended up convincing my mum to move closer to her. That one decision changed everything. As a result, my sister met her husband and had 2 kids. My other sister suffered a traumatic experience and had a child. My mom met my stepdad, had another child at 40, and nearly lost her life due to that relationship. All those major life changes trace back to me skipping school. Why did I skip? Honestly, I can't even remember. It was just something my mom allowed. Once every 6 weeks, if my grades were good. If I had gone to school that day, my mom would have gone to work. My aunt wouldn't have known where we lived. None of that would have happened. My grandpa once set out traveling the country with 2 friends. One was a boxer, one played guitar. Grandpa didn't have any standout skill, so he washed dishes to get by. They drifted from town to town, doing what they could to earn money. Eventually, his friends went home. Grandpa couldn't afford to, so he kept washing dishes, hoping for a break. One day, he found a wallet on the sidewalk. It had just enough cash for a bus ticket back to Illinois. He took it, went home, met my grandma, and started a family. That's how I'm here. I often think about the man who lost that wallet. He must have been upset, but I owe him my life. At 26, I donated all my possessions, quit my job, and moved across the country to live with people I didn't know in a city I'd never been to. Days later, I lost my wallet. No ID, no money, no job. Feeling defeated, I impulsively applied to a grad school, the only one for my field that was still open. It just so happened to be the top program in the country. I got accepted. 3 months later, I moved again. That lost wallet, which felt like failure, actually led me to the best years of my life. I like to imagine someone else's life changed for the better that day too. Here's one more. At work, I once tripped over a rug, but caught myself. I didn't bother to fix it. An hour later, an older coworker came in carrying several bags. She tripped over the same rug and fell face first into a door, dislocating her shoulder. She needed surgery and has been on medical leave for 3 months. Last I heard, she might sue the company. She has a history of taking legal action, and for all she knows, it was just a clumsy fall. The other man stepped away briefly, and during that time, his friend struck up a conversation with 2 women nearby. When he returned, he saw his friend talking and decided to join in. Both men eventually married the women they met that day. I'm the child of one of those couples. If it hadn't rained heavily at that specific moment, I wouldn't be here today. Which man was your father? The one who stepped away or the one who stayed? The one who stepped away. Let me give you some context. My parents got married in Mexico, but shortly after their wedding, my father moved to the US. He was a legal resident, so he could travel back and forth, but my mother wasn't. He would return to visit, my mum would become pregnant, and he'd head back to the US for work. During that time, he carpooled with a friend every day. He never missed a shift because he was saving to bring my mother, my siblings, and me to live in the US together. One cold, snowy morning, he decided to stay home. Something completely out of character. That very day, his carpool partner was in a fatal car accident. If my father had gone with him, he might have died too. We likely would have never moved to the US, and our lives would be entirely different. In my case, a random act led to devastating consequences. I once decided to urinate off a bridge. I ended up accidentally hitting a police officer. I got arrested and beaten so badly I spent over a week in the hospital. After that, I spent a month in jail awaiting trial. No one could afford my bail, and I had my wallet with me, so I couldn't avoid identification. By the time I got out, I had lost my job and my kids. My ex filed for emergency custody while I was in jail. The judge granted it, and to this day, I haven't regained custody. I got time served for public urination and assault charges, but my life took a serious turn for the worse. On September 10, 2001, my dad got a call. His job interview scheduled for the next day had to be postponed to Thursday because the employer had overbooked. That job interview was supposed to be at the World Trade Center. He wasn't there when the towers fell. My mum had unexplained digestive issues for over a year. Her doctor ordered a colonoscopy and found colon cancer. She had surgery quickly and recovered well. That discovery prompted her to urge my dad to get screened just in case. It turned out he had colon cancer too. 6 months after her surgery, he had part of his colon removed and also recovered. Oddly enough, my mom continued having the same digestive symptoms afterward. Eventually, they realized she had become lactose intolerant because both of my parents were diagnosed with colon cancer without major symptoms. My mom insisted I get tested too. That's how I, at age 27, ended up getting a colonoscopy I otherwise never would have. My life, and by extension my children's lives, exists in part due to that unexpected discovery. My very existence traces back to a chain of events involving death and faith. My maternal grandfather died in a tragic engine accident in his driveway. My mother, grieving and searching for direction, joined the Mormon Church at age 17 and moved from Fargo, North Dakota, to California to live with relatives. My paternal grandfather passed away when my dad was just 2. His stepfather wasn't kind to him, so my father left Illinois to live with his own relatives in California. Through a mutual Mormon friend, my parents met at a party and eventually married. I'm the 4th of 6 kids. My oldest brother didn't get accepted to BYU, so he chose Arizona State instead. I went on a Mormon mission to Argentina, then moved from Indiana to Arizona after returning. On my first Sunday at church, I ran into a buddy from my mission who invited me to a singles event. I wasn't enthusiastic, but I went. At that party, I reconnected with someone else I'd met in Argentina, and together we went to another gathering, where I met the woman who would become my wife. I was drawn to her at first because she had also lived in Argentina and traveled to learn Spanish. Now 10 years and 3 children later, we're still together. About a decade ago, my aunt went out with friends to celebrate one of them landing. Her dream job. She doesn't usually drink unless there's a real occasion, and this was one. Drinks were flowing. The next day, she went to work hungover and kept telling herself she figured she could power through. Only 4 hours left on her shift. No big deal. But then came a difficult customer with a bad attitude and an inflated sense of entitlement. Things quickly went downhill. It took her about an hour to manage the situation, and by the time it was over, she was exhausted and frustrated. Her energy completely drained, she asked a co-worker for a ride home. Once home, she discovered her 2 dogs had become tangled in each other's collars during rough play. It didn't seem like they'd been stuck for long, as they were still actively struggling, legs twisted, paws trapped, making choking noises. She quickly freed them, and they ran around, panting and excited, acting as if nothing had happened. Perhaps even happy she was home early. Neither dog seemed bothered by the ordeal. She kept a close watch, but no veterinary care was needed. After that day, she never left collars on her dogs when inside. Even after those dogs passed away, her current ones only wear collars while on walks. Instead, she uses microchips and tattoos to identify them in case they get out without tags. She often thinks about how differently things could have gone. If she hadn't had that drink, if her friend hadn't invited her to celebrate, if she hadn't been so drained from the bad customer, had any of that changed? She may not have come home early, and if she hadn't, her dogs might not have survived. Another story. If I'd called a girl just a few seconds earlier, her brother might have caught her before she left the house. She wouldn't have gone to the party, wouldn't have been drugged and assaulted by those men, wouldn't have crashed her car afterward. The man who tried to rescue her from the wreck wouldn't be in a coma, struck by a truck while trying to help. And she wouldn't have died a week later from the infections that set in right after she first showed brain activity again. That moment will always haunt me. After my father passed away, I was emotionally shattered. One day at university, I broke down crying, and a guy I knew approached me. He comforted me and mentioned a group that had helped him turn his life around. It was a self-development program, but joining was expensive. Still, he promised it was life-changing. I didn't agree right away. I had some money saved and was emotionally vulnerable, so I seriously considered it. Then the swine flu hit. I fell ill and was bedridden for 2 weeks. On my first day back outside, I unknowingly came into contact with my nephew, who had chicken pox. That was another 2 or 3 weeks down. By the time I recovered, I'd lost contact with that guy and didn't join the group. Months later, I ran into a former classmate who told me half our department had joined the same group. She was trying to leave, but was terrified of the backlash. Another girl who'd left earlier had experienced harassment, and she feared the same. The group turned out to be a large-scale scam disguised as personal development. It brainwashed its members and operated like a pyramid scheme. The man who'd invited me was one of the most devoted, staying until the bitter end. Eventually, the leader disappeared with a significant amount of money. Looking back, if I hadn't fallen ill, I likely would have joined and lost everything. My money, my independence, possibly even my mind. Since then, I've valued free thought more than ever. One evening I planned to take my child for a walk in the woods, but I couldn't find my right shoe. I'd found the left easily, but the right was nowhere. We searched the house for several minutes before finally locating it. Just as I reached for the doorknob, we heard gunshots. Someone had driven down a road and fired out of their car window. Had we left when we first intended, we would have been right at the edge of the woods, or even inside. That missing shoe might have saved our lives, and on a broader scale, I might never have been born if Ivan the Terrible hadn't killed his own son. That act changed the course of Russian history, putting the Romanovs on the throne. Catherine the Great later invited German settlers to farm the Volga region. My ancestors were among those German people from different parts of Germany who would never have met otherwise. If certain people hadn't been invited to Russia centuries ago, I likely wouldn't exist today. In a way, I owe my existence to a historical event, when Ivan the Terrible killed his own son around 500 years ago. That act shifted the Russian succession, eventually placing the Romanovs on the throne. Catherine the Great, one of the Romanovs, invited German settlers to farmland along the Volga River. My ancestors were among them, coming from various parts of Germany, people who otherwise might never have met. My grandfather served in World War II, handling army communications. At one point, he was stationed in a partially destroyed building, monitoring radio transmissions during an active battle. A German soldier entered the room and raised his weapon. My grandfather's rifle was out of reach. He glanced at the weapon. The soldier saw it too, but then lowered his own gun and simply walked away. Oddly, the only military record I ever found lists my grandfather as deceased on that day. Yet he made it back, started a family, and eventually, here I am. Stories like this feel more impactful when told in reverse. So let me start with something more recent. On the first day at a new school, I couldn't figure out where I was supposed to go. I ended up sitting alone in an empty classroom. That's where I met the girl who's now been my girlfriend for 2 years. If I hadn't gotten lost, we probably never would have met. I was only at that school because I was an exchange student from Denmark. Out of thousands of possible host families, I was placed with this one based on a casual remark about my favorite movie. That movie only became my favorite because of another long chain of events. I'd originally planned to travel with a different exchange program, but I signed up late and they were already full. The one I went with had spots left and sent me to this host family. The only reason I applied to be an exchange student at all was because I'd wanted to attend a LARP school. My dad thought that idea was too unusual and instead suggested an exchange program he saw in my little sister's magazine. I wanted to go to LARP school because I lost a friend in an accident and I had met someone from that school at his funeral. I only became friends with the person who passed away because our names were similar. And due to a mix-up, I was placed in the same class as him. My name came from a man my mom randomly met on the streets of London decades ago. She only met him because her car had broken down and he offered help. I could trace this back even further, but I'll stop here. The short version? I met my girlfriend, thanks to a car breakdown in London 30 years ago. Here's another story. A close friend of mine used to smoke 2 packs a day. Every evening he'd walk to the 7-Eleven across from his apartment, smoke a cigarette on the way, hang around outside while finishing it, toss the butt, go in to buy 2 packs, sometimes beer too, and smoke one on the walk home. The employees knew him well and liked him. They saw him nearly every day around. 7 p.m. Eventually, he decided to quit smoking. He told the staff at 7-Eleven and they supported him. They even went so far as to refuse selling him cigarettes when he had moments of weakness. One evening, frustrated after being denied a sale, he stormed out, crossed the street without checking the light, and got clipped by a motorcycle. The rider was thrown from the bike. Paramedics arrived and both were taken to the same hospital. It turned out the motorcyclist owned a small construction business. Feeling responsible, he spoke with my friend while they recovered. My friend mentioned he worked in drywall but disliked his boss. A while later, the biker offered him a job at better pay. My friend accepted. 2 years passed, and he was doing well. He had moved up the ranks, managing a team. Then he received a call. His boss had been in a severe motorcycle accident and was in the hospital. My friend rushed there. The man had suffered brain trauma and partial paralysis. Within weeks, he asked my friend to manage the business. My friend took over operations and succeeded. The business grew. Eventually, the owner sold it to him outright. A few years later, my friend sold the thriving company to a larger firm. He retired at 42, financially secure, worth over 10 million, all of that because he chose to quit smoking and because he gave his best effort when opportunity knocked. But still, if he hadn't made that decision to stop, who knows how different his life might be.